Hello, my name is Renzo Filinich. I'm a PhD student from University of Valparaiso, and I want to present part of my research that is called Qatipana. This project is about the process of the individuation process between machines, natural systems in the art context. I want to problematize in this research two ambiguous terms, that is machines and ecologies, for the familiarize certain ideas about techno-ecologies and suggest a political of ecology of machines, which will be focused on what Chinese philosopher Yu Hui calls technodiversity. Because conventionally, the tendency to think that machines and ecology are opposed to each other, because machines are artificial and mechanical, while ecology is natural and organic. This opposition, of course, today is the result of some stereotypes about the states of the machines that led us at this socio-technological problem that we have today. I want to start talking about the cybernetization or the information era that we live today, for giving the notion of individuation taken by Gilbert Simondon in this context. For the philosopher Bernard Stiegler, cultural and symbolic and informational technology has become a means to industrialize the formation of desire in the service of production, with destructive consequence from fixed and collective individuation. These media terms provide a lens from which to conceive machines as philosophical configuration of culture, technology, aesthetic, and work. Both animation illustrate how a machine works as theoretical concept and help differentiate machines in various ways, means, or strategies, machinations, abilities, instruments, or power or tricks. While technology implements scientific knowledge, machines are specifically linked to work. Animation from this perspective refers to the ontology of the machine and the way in which machines bring matter to life. More precisely, animation describes the machine in its ability to set matter in motion, either by means of a mechanism or an illusion, as organologic individuation Bernard Stiegler refers. A milestone in which we can observe this information, cybernetization, in the Latin American context, with this cosmotechnical approach occurs in Chile. In the early 70s, under the socialist government of Salvador Allende and the Popular Unity, in the emblematic book for biologists Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela, The Machines and Living Beings, Autopoiesis, the Organization of the Living, Francisco Varela briefly described his journal journey until he reached the first formulation of the concept of autopoiesis. And then he developed the genesis of the concept from the young work with Humberto Maturana. And later the research that he continued with other colleagues, in which from their perspective, they were transforming the meanings until reaching the conclusion that he summarized in 1994. In this itinerary, Varela explains in detail about the support they had from the cybernetician Heinz von Forster in the first formulation of 1979. And later in dissemination for the first manuscript, he also highlights the support they had from the cybernetics Stanford year and from the Cinco project team of CyberSyn between 1971 and 1973. Even as Varela remarks, it was Beer who, without cessation, raised in the creation of the principle of autopoiesis in social systems, outside from the field of biology, which would have anticipated what was later translated into Niklas Luhmann application of this concept. Something that not even biologists would have imagined, but perhaps an instance that Varela mentions to also specify. In his early foray into the faculty of medicine at the Pontificia Catholic University here in Chile, Varela pointed Professor Joaquin Lupo, who would have instilled in him an enthusiastic interest in physiology. What this text does not specify, perhaps because Varela, though it was well known antecedent, is that Lupo collaborated mainly with the Mexican cybernetician Arturo Rosenberg, as early in the late 30s at Harvard University, Rosenberg was key contributor to the formulation and gestation of the first cybernetics, working alongside with other water coming. That's Varela's training had another cybernetic route even before he was a student and college professor. The one that also got interested with the synthesis process of Latin American scientists who trying to develop a field close to cybernetics, typical of the region, Java and dialogue with other latitudes. Taking this background, one objective of this research is to develop an hybrid architecture that we call it Qatipana, Quichua words that denotes flow of information processing systems. Although it cannot be considered as a system theory, it has the utility of being able to explain some empirical observation that I present here. The implications and limitations of this model and the research that is being carried out to present its utility and probability as a model of algorithmic cognitive systems are part of the question and communication and affect the decisions provided by this cybernetic system. One of these utilities is to identify creativity, imagination, and co-evolution from a non-anthropocentric perspective. Imagination, taken with associating medium, and thus negotiates between two tendencies typical of any system, that is conservation and innovation. In doing so, I try to discuss what is valuable to incorporate notions of autonomy versus automatisms, complexity versus structure, and amplification as a relational and critically machine creative characteristic. Qatipana, as we see, is not exempt from this type of process. Furthermore, the information function as a condition of possibility for the communication of Qatipana to take place effectively, and it's precisely its relationship with its environment that artificial layer receives that information. The notion of meta-stability allows us to conceive of an artificial system as in the case of Qatipana, as a system that preserves potentials for future becomings and individuation. In this sense, the Simondonian concept of information has two antecedents. On the one hand, it responds to a process of donating a form to a subject. Inform, give a form. And on the other hand, it responds to the probabilistic mathematical and cybernetic conception of information. It uses the term hybrid ecologies to critically evaluate the historical and political dimension of a universality of technique in the Latin American context. Qatipana shows how a form of creative and technological activism, in turn that the concept of nature, must be integrated together with the concept of cosmopolitics and cosmotechnics. For doing this, I bring a methodology crossing by the arts, technology, culture, humanities, nature, science. In this context, I want to focus, as we see in this picture, how technology crossing these areas, because we are constituted with technology. Our cosmologies are constituted with cosmotechnics in this sense too. In that sense, I bring in authors that trying to give us this connection and giving us these crosses between technology, between arts, between culture, and between nature in a interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary notions of movements. Trying to use in this context, with these areas, and trying to work with the sympathetic creatives, taking Haraway, for example, Dexter, or environmental imagination, taken by Gall, Riberos de Castro, multi-natural links, Latour, or non-conscious imagination, Jails, or creativity transductive imagination by Simondon. Referring to Simondon technical individuation, I want to say that Simondon characterized aesthetics as a field of reticulation that unifies and produces reciprocal relations between otherwise disparate elements of the human life world. But when we confront Simondon's descriptions of general patterns of individuation, from crystals to biology, to technological formation of psychosocial entities with Bernard Stiegler's conception of mnemonic sterilizations, it becomes possible to greatly generalize aesthetics as a process for non-human domain, what Alexander Wilson calls general sterilization, that involves two complementary factors: intercession as aesthetics and superstitions as hypotheses. The supplementary and prothesis notions characteristics of the philosophy's mnemotechniques and Stiegler are actually so typical of all living systems. Taking this observation, we can appeal to what you propose, that to resume the project of overcoming modernity, we must undo and redo the translation of technique, physics, and metaphysics, not as a merely independent concepts, but also as a concept with existence. Only by recognizing this difference can we arrive at the possibility of a common task of the disciplines. In this sense, I want to take 4 objectives for this project. I want to bring the objectives in its presentations too. That is, one is thinking and reflecting criticism between duality, nature, culture, and antagonism between culture and technique. Use the concepts. Another is use the concept of open machines, Simon Kellen's, and general chronology by Stiegler as a general principle from which to think about non-anthropocentric notions of creativity and imagination in relation to the process between culture and technology. Another one is define a relational notion of creativity. Judgment is not exercised by an individual, in humans or non-humans, but rather occurs in the energetic exchange between a relative entity, stable, and associated environment, as Monotelas believe. Machine creativity, not as an attribute, and the last one, machine creativity, not as an attribute of a technical individual, but as an operation of regulation of the technical set. Now, taking the notion of general chronology by Bernard Stiegler, approach must be understood as the beginning of a configuration, which allows us to understand the dependency between human machine and its politics. Aside from the use of materials based on an organizational approach, we can observe how they dialogue by meeting and expanding the identity, crossing with the environment, which for the case of this presentation, are analyzed or combined kinds of environments, interior, exterior, and technical. And these are mutually differentiating, which means there is never a means, but only Stiegler tells us. Through the production of technical organs, exosomatic, and the production of this specifically related to memory, exo and MST, and is related to human bodily interaction, delivery, and transfiguring aesthetic in the representation of an identity and realized and transcendent stages as a different reality. Another objective of this the word process will be first to explore how this difference arises when two open systems, a machine and a living being, in the same environment begin an exchange of information. Second, oriented to the question they observe how they are integrating into emerging relationships and emerging information that's given the respective individuation process for what we'll be calling creative inaction. This is what we call relational creativity later, but for now, I will describe transduction as a preliminary concept. For example, I could mention that this distinctive explains the particularity of the ambient technology discourse based on the metaphor, the personification of elements of the natural environment and the objects of work, the subjective mode and symbolic language to a philosophy of becoming, individuation, and destructive metamorphosis. This problem is solved by specifying what is that the individual must maintain to preserve in his being, changing the inessential. In the individual is being constituted by the coherence of the domain of transductivity. His internal transformation as his realization on the world will have a certain specific character, a certain